Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. Now, with our busy lifestyles, we can barely imagine a day going by without juggling the stresses and the hectic franticness of a crazy day. We live in this bubble of wrong food, wrong decision making. We think beforehand that we're going to make the right one, but when it arrives and the occasion arrives, we make the wrong decisions. Exercising, well, we hardly do any of that. The list goes on. Getting too little sleep, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The good news is that it's never too late to escape these patterns and these ruts that we're in. Unlock ways to optimize our lives, both physically and, of course, mentally. Now, to delve into this further, my guest this week is Erik Kruger, who joins us to chat a little bit about changing those habits. Of course, Erik's an international speaker, an accomplished executive coach, author, and co-host of the Expansive podcast. Erik, welcome.
Ryan, great to be with you. Thank you.
Listen, let's dive straight into it. Let's start by defining optimum physical and mental well-being. It's obviously not the same for everyone.
Yeah, I think often when we look around, I think there's something universal to it that, like, you look at someone and you can say, well, like, just based on how your hair is looking and your skin is looking, you look like you're in great condition and therefore you must be in good health as well.
Sure.
So I think there's something universal to it, but obviously, like you said, it's something that's quite unique to the person, to their genetic makeup.
Sure.
And I was actually listening to a episode the other day of where they were interviewing Chris Hemsworth, Thor.
Yes.
And like, obviously when you look at him in the movies, he's ripped, he looks amazing. And I think it was on the Kelly Clarkson show, and she was saying, like, look at you, like, you must have been in such great health.
Yeah.
But he was saying, like, the shape that he was in is almost impossible to maintain because of the hectic diet, the hectic exercise regime. So, like, you look at that and you go, that must be optimum health.
Sure.
But I think optimum health ultimately is the healthiest state that you're able to sustain over the long run.
Got you.
And not just these, like, sort of big highlight moments of peak health.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that because it's putting kind of expectations out there that are unrealistic when you see a Chris Hemsworth and realize that man doesn't look like that 24/7, 365, that he's looking like that for a specific role. When you speak about not waiting for the catastrophe, how does that work with our health?
Yeah. So, I deal with change all day, every day, right? And I believe there are certain preconditions for change. So certain things that need to happen for us to change. And if we are more aware of it, then we can actually use these conditions to help us change.
Got you.
So something like accountability, or creating a vision for the future, or having clarity about how to execute a certain plan.
Yes.
All of these are things that when you have them in place, they help you to change.
Got you.
Now, unfortunately, a big precondition for many people is catastrophe. Like, something needs to go wrong for them to change.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I actually have a background in healthcare. I was a physio for about 10 years. And I worked in hospitals and ICUs and step downs. And I saw this pattern repeat itself over and over, right? So, like, someone would come in, they had a hip replacement. We'd say to them, look, because hip replacements are usually due to osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis is a bilateral disease. So you would replace the one. There's a very high likelihood you need to replace the other one.
Got you.
So we'd say to them, listen, obviously you've just replaced this one. But how about you come in like 6 months or 12 months down the line? Let's replace the other hip.
Get it done now.
Before
it
degrades and like you fall. And like, how many people do you think actually came back? Very few.
Sheesh.
Very, very few. Because they all, like, they were fine. Like, oh, it's like a bit of a niggle. Like, I can wait.
Yes.
Until they fall, until the hip breaks while they're walking, and like catastrophe hits, and now they're like, well, now I need to change, right? So, like, we have this choice. It's like, when will you change? Will you make the decision while you're realizing, oh, there's a bit of a spiral, I need to, like, interfere, I need to change something right now before it gets to that point? Or will you wait for the heart attack, for the hip to break?
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think many of us are just programmed that catastrophe is just a very strong motivator for us.
It is. And almost we almost like walking that fine line of, listen, I've done this in the past, therefore I can keep doing it. Because in the past, I've got away with pushing myself to the extreme. I look at people that drink every night, that get used to a certain amount of alcohol, that increase that intake all the time, thinking, nah, this is fine. My body's, but to your point, waiting to that moment when something gives in. And it's almost like that is the turning point. Why do we have to wait till that turning point?
You know what's amazing about that, sorry to interrupt, is that so people come to the hospital, they both had heart attacks, right? The one person goes, well, actually, like, I'm not going to change, right? I'm just going to persist in the way that I went. This was a once-off event, like, whatever. And then the other person goes, like, I'm going to change in an instant. I'm not going to smoke anymore. I'm not going to drink.
Yeah.
And I always found that fascinating that you could have these two people coming in with the same big event they just experienced.
Yeah.
And someone is willing to change and someone isn't. But the person who does change changes immediately.
Sure.
Like we think we have to put all these plans in place to stop smoking or to start exercising,
Yes.
or like it has to be all these big things. But like what I experienced in the hospitals was that actually when you go through catastrophe, it's possible to change immediately.
Yeah.
Which also tells me that you don't need to go through catastrophe to change immediately.
I love that. I love that. How does environment shape our behavior?
I mean, it's such a huge player in how we show up. There's a quote from James Clear in his book Atomic Habits that says, environment is the invisible hand that shapes behavior.
Wow.
And when you think about it, like everything is affected by it. Like
Yes.
the route you take to work is affected
Yes.
by your environment.
Absolutely.
What you eat is affected by your environment. The habits that you cultivate is affected by your environment. And so obviously, if you think about it, if you are trying to lose weight, but your house is packed full of sweets and sugars and stuff, like what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
The same thing with your schedule. Your schedule is part of the environment that you create. And so if your schedule is just a reaction to what's happening around you all the time, people trying to get onto your calendar, people showing you where the latest fire is you need to put out, and you're not intentionally taking charge of saying, well, I want to schedule my day in a very specific manner so that it unfolds in a very specific way, I think you are largely a result of reactivity.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no intention behind it.
Correct, yeah.
And so I think whenever we have a new behavior that we are trying to cultivate, or a new outcome that we're trying to cultivate, it's great to think about the changes that you want to make. But I think it's more important to think about how will I shape the environment around me so that ultimately when I shape the environment over time, the environment shapes me back. And we're creating this very beautiful loop and interplay between you and your environment.
And things become habitual very quickly. I mean, I've got two young kids. Very quickly, in the space of a day or two, when you notice this in youngsters, the second they're into something, they're doing something, their sleeping pattern changes, whatever, it takes them just a couple of nights and they're into a habit. You can just imagine as an adult falling into those lifestyle choices that go, oh, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do that, and then it becomes a regular occurrence that we're just doing that.
Well, I mean, let's think about sleep for a moment. Like over the past couple of years, the importance of sleep has just been escalated and escalated and escalated.
Yes.
So now we're at a point where there's no more debate around the importance of getting a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you create an environment that is conducive to sleep?
Yes.
And I mean, that could range from, blackout curtains to air cons to getting off your screens beforehand.
Yes.
But you can't just think about, okay, I need to be in bed at 10.
Yeah.
Like that's the behavior.
Yeah.
The environment is the room and everything that you do beforehand.
Love it.
I've been trying to be more precise in my reading, right? Because I read on my Surface or I read on my PC. But what I find is I'll read for a little bit and then I'll jump to Facebook or I'll jump to like LinkedIn.
Everyone I think
we get
distracted. Yeah.
And so I decided, let me go and buy a Kindle.
Yes.
And it's a small change, right?
Absolutely.
But now that because I'm on a different device, there's no distraction, no interference.
Yeah.
So that has changed the environment that I operate in when I read. And all of a sudden, like I didn't have to worry about the behavior. I just changed the environment, and that changed the behavior.
Erik, we're caught in this rut. How do we change our behavior? We spoke about waiting for that catastrophic moment, but we can, to your point, change now. How do we get out of that rut we're in? How do we correct the course of our lives?
Look, what we are very clear about is that we all have the knowledge.
Yes.
It's just the conversion of that into action that's the difficult part.
Yes.
And so the smaller we can make this space between what we know and what we actually do, the better we'll do. And I think for that to happen, we just need to spend more time recalibrating.
Yes.
We need to create this space where we can think about what it is that we really want.
Yeah.
And how do we then put what we want into specific action steps.
Yeah.
And I've seen this in coaching over and over, I don't need to give people the answers. I don't need to tell them what to do. They know what to do. It's just how can we remove the obstacles that might be in your way?
Yes.
And that then speaks to, well, look at your environment. Like, is your environment actually conducive to those goals? But it's also, are your behaviors and the way that you think about the world, is that conducive to you ultimately reaching your goal? So when I wrote a leadership manual in the beginning of the year, and I called it The Art of Recalibration. And recalibration says that, well, there's this great example actually. There's a rule called the 1 in 60 degree rule.
Okay.
It says that for every 1 degree, like I mean, there's video actually, so you guys can see.
1
So
degree.
for every 1 degree that a plane veers off course, by the time it's traveled 60 miles, it's an entire mile away from where it's supposed to be.
Sheesh.
So you can imagine back in the day, without all the fancy equipment we have today, like if you were a pilot, you had to course correct all the time because there's a bit of a wind that pushes you off.
Absolutely.
You have to make sure that you stay on track, because if you're not, you're going to be far away from where you want to be.
Absolutely.
And so the principle applies to us as well, is that very often a small drift that might occur in your life at some point, like, you know, I was traveling for a while now, my eating went off the rails, my training went off the rails. It's a small drift that occurs.
Sure.
But if you don't course correct that,
yes,
over time, you're going to end up very far away from where you want to be.
Absolutely.
You know, and so the call to action is recalibrate, recalibrate, recalibrate. You are always going to drift. You're going to drift because you get lazy, you get bored, you get frustrated, you get distracted.
Or
things
sick,
happen
or even
in life.
sick.
People
Get ill and they go, I've been training so hard for something. And that illness then, you know, demotivates them. They go, I didn't feel like getting out there and training anymore. And
then it creates the environment that sustains that. And then So recalibrate. And I think the more we can practice that, especially in a world that's just so busy, you know, can we just create a little bit more space to reflect on what we are doing and how that lines up with where we want to go, and then course correct, recalibrate.
I love recalibrate. What are you doing? Recalibrate your life. Let's talk about accretion. How does this relate to choices we make?
Yeah, so accretion is a word I heard about in about 2015.
I'm looking at this word again. I've never heard of the word accretion.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful word, though, eh? Accretion. So accretion is just the idea that, actually it comes from astrophysics, that said that over time you have this bit of rock that floats in space, but it attracts all of these small particles onto itself.
Got you.
And over millions and millions of years, through this process of accretion, it becomes a planet, essentially. And so obviously accretion applies to us as well in our lives. And what we accrete, what we accumulate are small decisions and small actions. And ultimately that gives you the life that you have. We know this principle. But there's a quote that comes from Todd Henry that has always just stuck out for me. And I think relates well to this. It says, no one charts a course to mediocrity, yet it's a destination of choice.
Sure.
It's chosen in small ways over time. And these tiny, seemingly inconsequential decisions accumulate and eventually result in a state of crisis.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's etched into my memory. I'll never forget that. And it reminds me that accretion, this process of accumulation, has no bias. It doesn't care. Like, if you feed bad habits into it, guess what's going to give you? It's going to give you a bad lifestyle, right? It's going to give you a destructive lifestyle. If you feed good habits into it, it's going to give you that back in spades. You're going to have a great lifestyle. But we often think that it's the big moments that matter.
Sure.
When really it's the small moments that matter. And those small habits and those small decisions and those small actions, they will give you the lifestyle that you want, or the life that you want. They'll shape the environment that you are in. They'll create the kind of person that you are and the kind of person that you're becoming. So it's important to pay attention to those.
I love this conversation. So what's the easiest way for someone to get started on their journey to optimum health? Can you share some tips, maybe make a list of goals?
Yeah, like I think the very first thing is that you have to have the awareness of where you currently are.
Yes.
Which is always the hardest part, because we have to look in the mirror and we have to go, I haven't been looking after myself. Like, I could be doing so much better, you know?
Yes.
So that's always the toughest part. And often, you know, when we're stuck in survival mode and things aren't going well, we aren't even aware of it, because there are just so many other things that we're paying attention to. I've seen this in the teams and the leaders that I work with, which is that when performance and pressure picks up, self-care and nurturing goes down, you know? There's always this inverse relationship, when actually it should be correlated, that the higher the pressure, the higher the performance, the more we look after ourselves. But we don't, right?
Yes.
We put ourselves on the back burner. And then because of that, we don't have the time to go and look in the mirror and say, well, where am I at? But that's always number one. Number two is always ownership, that where you are is exactly because of what you've done.
Sure.
So, and where you're going to go will be exactly the result of what you're going to do. And that's you having to take ownership of that. And then I think the third step is that it doesn't have to be big. The path to optimum health starts with small incremental changes. It starts with accretion.
Got you.
And a very real example of this is, you know, I drink too much dairy, like way too much dairy. And the reason is because I drink like 5 cappuccinos a day. And so I decided, I love my coffee. I love my coffee. I love the dairy. But, but so I decided that instead of cappuccinos, let me just switch to cortados.
Got you.
Like now you're doing like half the amount of milk.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, over the course of like 5 cappuccinos or 5 cortados a day, times like 7 days in the week, times 12 months, like all of a sudden that starts adding up, right? You're cutting out liters and liters of milk.
Yeah.
But it's those small changes. And like all of a sudden now, like maybe I'm skipping 1 cappuccino. And like incrementally, you are working your way towards optimum health. So don't think that it has to be this big revolutionary change in your life. Think about the small things where you can start just course correcting a little bit. And as you course correct and you form those cornerstone habits, you'll see that many other things start taking care of themselves as well.
Yeah. And to go back to that wonderful analogy of the plane going, of course, look, to get back on, again, you can't just hop back onto course. It's those small changes that are going to bring you back to being on course. I think we live in a society that wants results now. Yeah. I mean, Erik, we want to change. We don't want to be thin to 6 months' time. We want to be thin tomorrow.
For sure.
We want something now to happen because we have fed so much stuff in the modern age of getting things and feeling that kind of a sense of self-worth now. We don't actually forecast that far ahead in terms of where we want to be. And even if we're not in great shape now, we want results as quick as possible. So we'll grab whatever quick fad diet or whatever quick thingy, whatever quick fix is going to get us back on course. We'll give it to us. We're keen on that. But I love that you've said that. It's small corrections because, it doesn't have to. I think that's a very off-putting, I think, just to kind of wrap up for a lot of people, is once they've gone too far off course, they almost feel impossible to get, like it's an impossibility to get back on course.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love that you haven't made it such an far out goal to achieve. Start small. Start adjusting where you can to bring yourself eventually back onto course and stay with the process.
Yeah, everything to me comes back to how intentional are we living our lives.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's like the most intention you can bring to your life is going to be the very next decision that you make and the next action that you take. And if you can be intentional with that, then you can be intentional with the next thing. And if you can be intentional with that, you can be intentional with the next thing. And
absolutely,
over time, what you find is that now, because you've been intentional, you've designed the life that you want.
Yeah.
You've designed the body that you want.
Yes.
You've taken charge of your health.
Yeah.
But it starts with that focus on intentionality.
I love that. We've all been there before, waking up the next morning going, why? They said I could only just going to have one. I'm just going to have one with mates. It's never one. It ends up being another and another. And it's human nature to want to stay around and to want to feed that need to be loved, that need to be in that moment. We need to be stronger sometimes and just say no so that the next morning we can wake up and be grateful that we made good decisions. Erik, thank you very much. This has been really great to have you on this podcast. My name is Ryan. I'm with this podcast every week called Health Matters. Join us again. It's proudly brought to you by Cipla. If you are listening via Apple Podcasts, rate, review, give us a thumbs up, and we'll be back with another episode of Health Matters soon.